Doing a little NBA draft team fit series here. Stephon Castle went fourth overall to the San Antonio Spurs. We both have said we love this pick. Great value for the Spurs, in my opinion. He was the number one player on my big board. You get him fourth in a pretty wide open draft. You got to feel good about it. But more specifically, how's he going to fit? It's kind of interesting. He said he only wanted to go with teams that need a point guard. At first glance, when he got drafted, you thought he got what he wanted. Now the Spurs signed Chris Paul for a year. Wemby, obviously, who you're building around. But do you like this landing spot for Castle, and do you think it's going to work out?
I do like this landing spot for Castle a lot because one, before we even get to like what he could add possibly offensively as a point guard position, whatever you want to label him as, this team has the chance to be scary good defensively. Like Stephon Castle was one of the best on-ball defenders, probably the best on-ball defender in the country as a true freshman last year for one of the better defensive teams in the country. And he was giving people fits all the time. He was putting people in Alcatraz. You pair that next to Wemby and his rim protection, his defensive skills, while also having him next to guys like Devin Vassell, Trey Jones, a good defender in his own right. This could be a really, really good defensive team. But I think this gives Wemby a guard who I think can take advantage of him as a lob threat, and also I think can develop. Like Stephon Castle has another step to take in his game offensively, where we could be looking at a very special duo moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's where to start for sure. Like, and look, I think this is one of those things with a young team where, like, when they're ready to contend, the roster could look a lot different than it does now. No disrespect to some of the guys who have been starters on this team. No disrespect to some of the guys that are going to come off the bench on this team. But like 2-3 years from now, when Wemby is ready, or when Stephon Castle and Wemby as a duo are ready, I think you're probably trying to supplement them with other guys. I think Chris Paul is obviously not going to be here in 3 years. Like this is a guy to learn from and see where it goes and maybe help make them competitive this year. But I think long term, that's the whole story here, right? Is how special could they be defensively with Castle and with Wemby? Um, do you think he's going to get any look at point guard at all? Or was that all just sort of like his camp wanting it and the Spurs are going to shut it down?
I think that it's real. I think he is going to get a chance to play point guard. And look, I don't think it hurts him to give him a chance either. Because what's the worst that happens? It doesn't work out. Okay, it doesn't work out. What are we picking eighth next year? Plenty to choose from. Come on down, Valdez Edgecombe Jr. There you
Yeah.
go. Like come down any other point guard. Like there, if it doesn't work out, I don't think it really sets you back. But if it works out, then you're like, oh shit, we're good.
I think the Chris Paul signing made a lot of sense in that regard because there's no pressure on him, or like at minimum, it gives the Spurs an out, right? Like if they don't play Castle at point at all, it's like, well, we got Chris Paul here. We want you to learn from him. And then if he does learn from him and behind the scenes he looks like a point guard, then who better to learn from a year and take the keys over in the future? But to me, it was a smart organizational move to bring CP3 in the middle of all of this. With that said, I don't think Castle's a point guard. I don't think he ever will play point guard. I don't think any decision the Spurs have made is with Castle playing point guard in mind. Like you look at their summer league roster, they signed 9 guards, most of them being point guards that aren't Stephon Castle. He's going to be playing with smaller point guard types every time he's getting reps as an on-ball guy, and I think that's good for him long term. What do you think the Castle ad does for like Keldon Johnson, Devin Vassell?
So Devin Vassell, I don't know if it really affects him as much. Honestly, maybe it gives him more of a chance just to embrace being on the wing, which I think will help. I think the addition of Castle and CP3 kind of makes Trey Jones the loser of this situation. And who knows, maybe honestly, I think Trey Jones is good enough where maybe they could get some trade value for him and he can go to a situation where he gets more of exposure and then they can get something back that'll help them in the short term or even the long term, who knows. But I don't think it necessarily affects Vassell. I do think it affects Trey Jones, but that's not just Castle, that's CP3 edition as well.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. It's one of those things that's interesting because I have viewed the Spurs as a team that's just like collecting a bunch of young wings that I believe in, right? Like Vassell, Keldon, Blake Wesley, Malachi Branham, City Sissoko are all guys that I believe in. If Castle hits, I think like 3 of those guys are just completely gone from this roster.
Mm.
And it's probably not Vassell and it's probably not Keldon, but there is a lot of wings. There's a lot of overlap. So it would almost be better for them if Castle was a point guard in the future. But I don't know. It's just one of those things. Like, I think all in all, this is a good fit. Castle and his camp might be upset about the fact that Chris Paul was signed, but I guess you'll see. And in the short term, the Spurs could be significantly upgraded because they just added the most talented player in the draft. Is there any world the Spurs are in the play-in next year?
Yes.
Do you think that's better for them than being bad one more season? Because there are people who would be like, just wait one more year.
I would wait one more.
Just get your best possible guy you can add from the Edgecombe, Harper, Bailey, Cooper Flag group, and then call it good.
There's a world where if I was a GM, I'm shutting Wemby and Castle down after 25 games.
That's what I might do too.